we are good to go.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to call the October 13th Everett Public School Board of Directors regular meeting to order. Will you please join me for this flag salute? I pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we please have the secretary call the roll?
President Mason,
Present.
Vice President Lassane. I know she's here somewhere. Director Berg.
Present.
Director Mitchell.
Present.
Director Nichols.
Present.
Student Representative Hussein.
Present.
Student Representative Pilch-Passon.
Present.
I see that Director Lassane is on the call, and so we will go ahead and mark her as present, given that she's having a few technical difficulties, and then we can follow up if for some reason she's kind of popping in and out here as she gets coverage, it looks like.
Okay.
Okay, so as always, our first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please introduce tonight's agenda?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public, good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the following: the superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, segment for public comments, segment for routine business, a segment for strategic progress monitoring, segment for information discussion, segment for new business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes have been made. Item 9.05, approval of minutes of the September 25th, 2020 special meeting. The meeting minutes were updated with the board's responses to the proposals. Item 11.02, land acknowledgement. The presentation was added. Item 13.01, board meeting agenda structure, was updated with an action item, and item 14.02, regular meeting, October 27th, 2020. Topics for the upcoming meeting were updated. The board may elect to change the order of business by a majority of the vote of the members. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
So moved. Oh, second.
Okay, it has been moved by Director Nichols and seconded by Director Mitchell to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move to the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say no. The agenda is adopted. Oh, I think we have Director Lassane. Pam,
I'm here. I just can't see it.
And were you able to participate in the adoption?
So
We'll follow up with her in a bit. We will move to section 5.0, which is recognitions.
I think I can. I can see.
We do not have any recognitions, which takes us back to Dr. Salzman and the superintendent's report.
Good evening and thank you. First of all, I'd like to add a few things tonight and to share with you that October 19th, we're going to have another Connect meeting with our community from 5 to 6 p.m. And we look forward to not only hearing your input, but working together as we embark on this continued great journey that we're attempting during the COVID. And it was quite beneficial to hear from everybody. And we look forward to that input on October 19th. I want to share that I met with the ASB leaders. I have one more school to meet with next week, and I'm so proud of what I heard from them today, their honesty, their integrity, and what their life's been during COVID and how the start of the year has begun and where they're at now and the great job that they're doing and the ideas that they're providing for other student leaders. I would like to thank the sponsors of the ASB and to thank all teachers during this time this is not an easy journey for everybody. So to our teachers and staff and to everybody out there and to our community, we're all in this together, and it is so much appreciated. And then finally, a special thank you to everybody that contributed to the website. We're getting great feedback regarding our new website, to the communications team and to our tech team and everybody that worked long hours to get this done. This web page not only benefits our students, but it benefits our community and our city. And it's just wonderful to see the hard work that was put into this. So kudos to everybody. Wish everybody continue to be safe. And as we continue to be safe, it's helping all of us. So thank you and many blessings this evening.
Thank you very much for the update. We will now move to board and student representative reports or comments. Is there anyone who would like to begin this evening? Director Mitchell.
Yeah, sorry, I just paused because I just
I
make
thought
sure
you
nobody
like
else wants to go
last week, I'd have to
first.
Call on someone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to tell Dr. Salzman and the community and Kathy Reeves that on the WASDA Ledge meeting today, the 5 school district was asking about how to help all their 70 languages they have with 5,000 people. And I said, please reach out to Kathy Reeves, have your communication person, because we just updated our website to be able to translate. And I don't know how many languages it is, but hopefully our large district can help your small district. So she was very thankful, and hopefully she'll pass that information on. The second thing is I want to thank the school board and then everybody else who visited us when we attended the WASDA General Assembly. It was a time for us to hear all the WASDA priorities and have our impact if we wanted to agree with them or not agree with them. And it was very nice time for collaboration, sitting socially distanced, wearing our masks, and having everybody, some people pop in socially distanced wearing their masks. Then did attend also the WASDA regional meeting, where there was a lot of talk about, and even today on the legislative meeting, a lot of talk about students not enrolling in schools. And I appreciate Dr. Salzman helping me understand the low number of kindergartners and where they are in our community and what the impact might be next year, because there's a lot of talk about, are they taking a gap year? Are we gonna have an inundation of kindergartners next year, or first graders who may or may not be prepared? So it's, I appreciate our team, Chad Golden and his team working on that. And then WASDA did release all the rankings of the legislative priorities today, with the #1 ranking being that the fully funding of the SEB. Second ranking being support for special education. Third ranking being fully funding staffing levels, addressing digital equity in students was the 4th. And one thing they did stress for our students is on the legislative priorities that either WASDA has or that we will develop, that I'll work with Jeff and the school board for developing our legislative priorities, making sure that we have the student voice in the legislative priorities. It's great that we have the students on the board here, but making sure that we're meeting their voice, hearing their voice when it comes to funding, budget cuts, special ed, equity, those sorts of things that are the priorities. So thank you so much for everyone, and I am finished.
Thank you for that. Appreciate the update. Any other directors or student representatives like to comment?
I'll go. So I just wanted to thank everybody. One small minor personal update. So I'm out of my back brace. At least when I'm sitting up on calls now, I've got this whole huge contraption under here that you can't see, but this beautiful quilt cover. So my PT did all that. It's just amazing. So I'm excited to be able to sit up and interact with everyone. So thank you for your thoughts and prayers. And I was able to sit on the IR today with Emerson, and that was fantastic. I had not been able to Zoom into any classrooms. This is the first time I had the honor of doing that. So that was a great experience. It was a great IR as usual. I love that approach to assessing schools. So I'm glad that we're able to do it in the virtual world. And then just kind of a shout out that Emerson's our Spanish immersion school. So I love that we have a Spanish immersion school. That just makes my heart sing. So I'm excited for the future of choice. I'm excited about being a part of that process, and that the work is continuing despite this public health crisis. And then I just want to echo Director Mitchell, bravo on the website, outstanding work. Again, the amazing things that are coming out of the district office during a pandemic. It's just amazing. You guys are doing a great job, and I can't thank you enough, and the community sees it and hears it. So just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations for getting out of that brace. I know that was a big step forward for you. So nice to have you back and moving a little more. Let's see, Director Nichols.
Yeah, so just a brief comment. I actually wanted to thank Mike Gunn and the operations team at the district who were able to help us get some new reader boards for some of the schools, not the least of which being Hawthorne, who, speaking of languages, there's over 20 languages spoken at this school. They've had a very small analog reader board up that they don't have enough letters for, so communicating with their parents in an effective way has been a challenge for them. So this is going to go a long way to helping that school. And I really just appreciate Mike and his team going out of their way to help secure funding for that. And I also, originally we were going to try to raise the funds. So I also want to thank Kay over at the foundation for being willing to partner with me on that as well.
Great. That is excellent news, I have to say. Thanks for taking the lead on that. Director Lassane, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Do you have any comments that you would like to share?
Yes, I would like to thank the staff and at
Oh, you just cut out on us. So I'm going to move on to student representatives and see if we can catch you at the end here. Would either student, Tara, would you like to start, please?
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone saw, but I popped in and out because my computer decided to restart. So that was what happened. One thing I wanted to talk about is I was able to attend not today's meeting, but last week's meeting with some of the ASB students, and I will hope to be there next week because it'll be my own school's meeting. But yeah, I was there with ASB students from Cascade, just talking about how the school year is going for students on our end. And so I wish that I could share with you all that all of our students are 100% happy and super thrilled with online learning. Unfortunately, that's not exactly the case, but it's really good that we have those opportunities to interact with the administration, and I'd like to thank Dr. Saltzman for allowing us to have those meetings with our ASBs, because it's a new environment for everyone, and I think that for teachers and for students, adjusting and making sure that we're meeting each other where we're at and acknowledging that students have lives outside of the computer all day. I think that opening up those pathways to have those conversations about what can be better is a really good step that we're working towards. And so even though I will say socially and emotionally, I know that me and some of my friends and peers are not doing our absolute best that we ever have in school. It's good that we're making progress and we're having those conversations to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor and honesty about that. Whenever I have an opportunity to be out in the community and talk to parents, there seems to be a very divided, some students are and families are very happy in a remote environment, and some are very anxiously awaiting to get back into the classroom. So I think you captured that a bit with some of your comments. Let's see, Student Representative Hussein.
Hello, good evening. Today I was able to meet with Mr. Saltzman and talk about what ASB is doing at this time and how we're getting students involved. And what ASB is doing, at least at Everett High, is we're doing of course, with the permission of our administration, we are doing trunk or treat. We are doing spirit weeks. We're even making a Spotify playlist just to get kids happy and going during the school year. And we were asked what are some things that we could improve, or he asked that to us. And it wasn't waking up at 8 a.m. It was more towards the time periods of the actual first and second and third period. That was really the subject that we talked about for a while with Mr. Saltzman, and just bringing up from what the students tell me to tell Mr. Saltzman, that's exactly what we did. I was also able to go to a conference via Zoom, of course, to meet other ASB presidents. And we talked about similar things as well, concerns with how are we going to get students engaged and what can we do. So we shared a bunch of ideas, things that I took back to Everett High School as well, and the concern of the periods, the long length periods, raising a concern again. So I would just say that was one of the things that we looked into a lot.
Thank you for sharing that. Like many of us, conferences are all now remote, and I'm thankful that you were able to participate and still do that. Okay, so I think Pam's still struggling to get reconnected. Several of my comments have already been mentioned, but I did want to note that when I looked at the parent survey data, first of all, the fact that over 4,400 individuals participated in the survey, I think was just phenomenal. I feel like the more families and students that we can get to respond to these surveys, the more powerful the outcomes will be for us and help us create that path forward that is most meaningful and relevant to all our families. But I did notice that the number of students, or the number of families that felt prepared for remote learning, either somewhat to vary, was, I believe, it was 97% or 96%. That's phenomenal. That just suggests that the work that was done over the summer really paid off when we hit the ground running in September. And I just want to thank everyone for that. And then also on the technology side, to Brian and his team, 94% of our families felt like they had the technology that they needed to start the school year. And again, that is just a phenomenal number and suggests the hard work and preparation that went into launching this school year. So thank you all for that. And then, of course, I wanted to give a shout out to the new website as well. But that's been said a couple times, but it is amazing and it looks great. And I'm so thankful that we were able to do that during this time. I think more so than ever, those tools are really needed in a simple and concise way for our parents to access. And then I just want to express some frustrations over the fact that cases are going up again in our county, which limits our ability to bring students back into the classroom and back into schools. And although some families may be okay with the remote learning, we know that students do best when they are in a classroom with a teacher and getting the support that they need. So it makes planning difficult and moving forward difficult for the district and for all the districts, for the nation really. And I just look forward to a time when we're going to have more stability around that and we can do some more definitive planning. I'm going to ask if Director Lassane is on one more time before we move forward. Not hearing from her. I think at this point, we're just going to have to assume she's going to have to do double comments next time, I guess. And we will go ahead and move forward with section 8.0, which is our public comment section. And Darlene, could you let us know if there are any public comments tonight?
We have no public comments.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to our consent agenda. And Dr. Saltzman, can you please provide an overview of the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of a routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. Gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received no questions regarding items on the agenda. The consent agenda is presented as published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve tonight's consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we will move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The consent agenda is approved. And tonight, for our strategic progress monitoring item, we have a social emotional learning update. And to kick things off, I believe Peter Scott is going to get us started.
Thank you, President Mason. Really appreciate the opportunity. Good evening. We, being Dave Peters and myself, are excited to share with you the social emotional learning update tonight. And Dave, you're going to get the PowerPoint going here. Hopefully everybody can see that. So Dave, could you advance the slide? So judging by the author of this quote, this is an ancient concept, social emotional learning, really. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. It speaks to the social emotional learning prerequisites as a foundation to other forms of academic learning. And it speaks to why it's so important for us in our district to grow and nurture students' social emotional skills in intentional ways. And I think Tara, during her opening comments, our student rep to the board, captured the importance very well earlier this evening. So our goals this evening and key performance outcomes speak to this, and what we want to do in our district and what we are working more intently each and every month, particularly during COVID closures, is to understand and prepare our staff to prepare our students to be college, career, and life ready, and particularly emphasizing that idea, that concept of life readiness, to be able to handle variables and thrive in uncertain environments, which is certainly, again, Tara mentioned it, and I think we've all experienced it recently. We also want our students to feel safe in their learning environment, safe in multiple forms of that word, so emotionally, physically, intellectually, so they can bring their full selves into the learning space, whether that's a virtual learning space, whether that's in person. So our objectives today are to provide context around students' social emotional learning in our district as a critical strand of the multi-tiered systems of supports. And Dave's going to talk a little bit about where SEL lives within that construct called MTSS. And then to illustrate systems of both preventative and responsive tools and processes supporting students' social emotional learning. Those are our two objectives. So the outcome, I'm sorry, the outline, Dave, if you want to advance. Dave is going to talk about why SEL matters. And I don't know that we need to sell that no pun intended. We don't need to sell that concept of social emotional learning because I think everybody on this call knows that it's important, but how and where are we leveraging it in the service of our students and families? He's going to talk a little bit about the student support services structure, who's working in that area, and then frame social emotional learning in the context of MTSS. I mentioned that earlier. And then talking about some tools and processes underneath that MTSS umbrella. So that you're sort of familiar with the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supports, the concept that tier 1 are universal supports. This is what what each and every student in our district receives through content areas, through explicit cell instruction, through access to curriculum materials that really highlight the growing of social emotional learning skills, and in ways that have historically sort of been in the purview of school counseling. It's vastly, and for good reason, expanded woven into the constructs of our classrooms. He's also going to talk about tier 2. So what about those targeted supports? How are social emotional learning data being assessed alongside other important indicators like attendance, like behavior, like academic performance, attendance? And then tier 3 are those intensive supports for students. And so that's the frame for this evening. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Dave Peters, our Director of Student Support Services. Thank you very much.
All right, well, good evening. And I just want to say, as a proud former principal who has worked with thousands of students in Everett Public Schools, what an honor it is to be serving in this role as Director of Student Support Services. And I'm really excited to be sharing with you tonight about our social emotional learning program in Everett Public Schools, and also our progress this year, particularly in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So to give some background, the social emotional learning, which is SEL abbreviated, is a process through which adults and children learn to recognize and manage their emotions. They demonstrate care and concern for others. They develop positive relationships, they make good decisions, and they behave ethically, respectfully, and responsibly. And we all recognize that our emotions play a strong role in influencing our motivations, our ambitions, our confidence, and our interactions with others. And as students grow in their ability to understand and regulate their emotions, they also increase their ability to perform academically and to engage in positive relationships, problem solve effectively, and empathize with others. So I'd like to share a brief video clip that will just help further frame and summarize the purpose of SEL education, and particularly in our current times.
Challenging, unprecedented, uncertain. These words all describe what we're experiencing right now as students, educators, and families are faced with navigating a new normal. But as we plan for the school year ahead, one thing is clear: the intrinsic value of social emotional learning, or SEL. Here's why. 1. SEL can foster a sense of safety and be used with trauma-sensitive practices. Students can't focus on learning if they don't feel safe and supported. The COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis around systemic racism have created traumatic experiences for many families. These experiences contribute to fear, anger, and anxiety, and increase the risk of toxic stress. As part of a trauma-sensitive approach, SEL can help students manage their emotions in a safe and supportive way and set them up for learning success. 2. SEL helps build positive connections and relationships. This upcoming school year involves a lot of uncertainty, and site closures have made it difficult to maintain the strong relationships that previously developed between students, teachers, and families. This fall, whether you're planning for in-person or remote teaching, using SEL to build trusting connections within your learning community can help lay the necessary foundation for academic learning. 3. SEL helps address the learning inequality caused by school closures. Remote learning is inherently challenging and not always appropriate developmentally. Students who are already struggling socially or academically are often the ones who face more severe challenges with remote learning. SEL can play a key role in helping students build the skills they need for effective learning, from self-regulation to problem solving, especially in an out-of-school setting. 4. SEL provides support to teachers and staff. It's more important than ever to care for educators' well-being. By helping teachers and staff manage stress, build trust with students and colleagues, and stay engaged at work, SEL can strengthen the whole school community. Now is the time to bring SEL front and center. But don't just take our word for it. In a recent survey by CASEL with responses from 37 states, 84% reported that SEL has increased in importance as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and 78% of states reported that district-based SEL requests have increased since the beginning of the pandemic. We often talk about SEL in terms of improving behavior or its academic benefits, but SEL also builds skills that help bring us together in times of crisis and in everyday life. And in this uniquely challenging moment, SEL is a critical tool in both addressing the immediate needs of students, families, and staff, and helping them succeed in the new school year.
So the growth of our Student Support Services Department from one person in 2017 to a team of 5 this year, I think is really indicative of the importance that we place in Everett Public Schools on meeting the physical and emotional needs of our students in order to help them achieve academic success and their life readiness, as Dr. Scott mentioned. And the changes that we've made as a district are in response to historical data and also through a lens of equity. So introducing our team, Laura Phillips is in her 2nd year as the Director of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, and her role has broadened to leading a team of MTSS facilitators this year, each of whom bring varied and very valuable skills to the work. Kristen Walker has a background as an Achieve teacher, and she has worked at the middle and high school levels here in Everett for a number of years. And Terry Coleman has served as a counselor at the elementary and middle school levels, and he has deep experience teaching the 2nd Step curriculum. And Stephanie Cucci has been an administrator at all 3 levels in Everett Public Schools and has a background in K-12 counseling. And the progress, I've got to say, that they're making in just 2 months as a new team is truly impressive. So we've been intentional about restructuring our multi-tiered systems of support model to align with the 4 Everett Public Schools pillars of climate, culture, systems, and instruction. And social and emotional learning is a foundational component that lives within each of these pillars in a proactive and responsive support for student success. So as I share with you about our SEL program in progress, I want to first take a moment to review our MTSS framework. So Everett Public Schools uses a tiered approach to supporting social and emotional learning, and all students receive the similar elements of SEL instruction in the classroom. And these are called Tier 1 or universal supports. And when some students need supports in addition to those at Tier 1, they will receive targeted help that is sometimes delivered in small groups. And these are Tier 2 supports. And then a few students will need more intensive supports that are specific to their individual circumstances, which might also be delivered over an extended time. And supports at this level are called Tier 3. And within our MTSS structure, we provide tiered supports in our schools for academics and behavior in addition to social emotional learning. And this makes sense because of how interconnected these are as seen by our student data patterns. So if a student is struggling emotionally, for example, it will likely affect their academics and their behaviors. If a student is struggling academically, it will affect how they feel, and we may often see them acting out in their behaviors. And if their behaviors are creating issues with relationships or causing them to miss school, their academics may be impacted along with their enjoyment of school and their sense of belonging. So the backbone of our universal supports in Tier 1, Everett Public Schools provides direct instruction in social emotional learning via 2nd Step curriculum to all students through 8th grade. And the 2nd Step curriculum is aligned to both the nationally recognized CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, and the Washington State SEL standards that are adopted by OSPI. And the 2nd Step K-5 curriculum provides grade appropriate instruction across 4 units of study that focus on developing skills for learning, empathy, emotional management, and problem solving for our students. So during the remote learning, students have direct 2nd Step instruction that have been built into their schedule each day. Now, what's really exciting is that all of our middle schools and high schools will begin training and an implementation process over this school year with Ruler. It's an SEL approach that's developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And Ruler is an acronym for Recognizing, Understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions. Ruler implementation involves a systematic professional development for the adults that are involved in the education of children so that emotions become central to learning, teaching, and parenting. So to help illustrate this further, I'd like to share a brief video clip by Dr. Mark Brackett, who is the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence.
When you look in the English dictionary, there's about 2,000 words to describe the human emotional experience. Most of us use about 3. People say things like, no one cares how you feel. Well, I've never had an emotion education. I don't know the words. We have created a culture where building a vocabulary for our inner lives is not addressed. Our culture, our schools, our environments are not preparing people to really become more self-aware. So we believe that emotions matter for 5 kind of big reasons. The first is attentional capacity, that how we feel is driving whether or not we are engaged or curious in a classroom. Emotions matter for decision making, that how we feel colors the way we see the world and influences the choices we make. Emotions matter for relationships. Emotions are signals to approach or to avoid. They matter for mental and physical health. If we don't attend to our feeling states with healthy strategies, our emotions are going to, in many ways, destroy our health. And then finally, emotions matter just for everyday creativity and innovation and performance. Unless we have the strategies to deal with the disappointments and the frustrations, we likely won't be able to achieve our dreams. Every student deserves the permission to feel all emotions. And I'm working towards a future where emotions are a part of the way leaders lead, teachers teach, students learn, and families parent their children. So I think we're finally getting into a place in our nation where we are giving feelings permission to be part of the curriculum. And to me, that is a dream come true.
So with a background of our universal Tier 1 supports with Second Step and Ruler, and before we move to Tier 2, we have a number of tools such as these that we use to assess our student in a variety of areas, and that allows us to design appropriate proactive supports and to monitor the progress of our intervention efforts. So the most comprehensive of these tools is the Panorama Success Platform. The Panorama survey for students is currently open this fall, right now, for the fall semester, and we're eager to begin looking at the results of the student responses over a range of important social and emotional areas. We're particularly interested in feedback during this pandemic with the remote learning environment, and we're also interested in the data that we'll be receiving for the first time at the elementary level. So as I mentioned, when some students need supports in addition to those at Tier 1, they will receive targeted help that is sometimes delivered in small groups. And our Tier 2 process is designed as a system approach where through a referral process, we identify students who will benefit from common areas of social and/or emotional supports. And we monitor the effectiveness of the interventions and then make adjustments appropriately to each student. Within the Panorama Student Success Platform, we have at our fingertips a universal screener tool that's helpful to identify students in need of these Tier 2 supports. And intervention plans are subsequently created to develop desired outcomes, actionable strategies, and to designate staff champions to work with and monitor the student progress. And then the monitoring of progress is charted, and then it's accessible by the key staff members. So this continuous process of assessing, intervening, monitoring, and reviewing leads to the identification of a few students who will need more intensive Tier 3 supports. So these supports are specific to their individual circumstances, and they might also be delivered over an extended time. Now, the pandemic last spring included a lot of what we might term teaching in a time of crisis. But fortunately, now we're at a place where teachers have had the opportunity to prepare for distance learning with more purpose and intent, and using what works best to accelerate students' learning, all the while maintaining a focus on equity. So different than last spring, though our students and teachers this fall didn't know each other when they met on those first live Zoom sessions back in September. You know, for our kindergartners and some of our first graders, they've never even been to a regular school before. And for our 6th and 9th graders, this was the first time attending their respective middle and high schools. So from the August lid days and through the start of the school year, we've leveraged the insights and experiences of the visible learning research in the distance learning playbook, being intentional to start the year with a focus on self-care, establishing classroom norms and routines, and developing relationships to form very supportive learning communities. And a couple other SEL efforts to highlight for this year include trauma-informed training for counselors at 12 of our participating schools across each level through the UW Smart Center with Clay Cook, mental health supports that are conducive to a remote environment, and the implementation of programs that provide social skill building and relationship restoration as alternatives to suspension. So it is exciting and encouraging to see all that we're doing in Everett Public Schools to support our students. And so to bring all this back to the purpose, I'd like to play an audio clip from the well-known researcher, author, and speaker, Brené Brown.
As I often tell teachers, some of our most important leaders, we can't always ask our students to take off the armor at home or even on their way to school, because their emotional and physical safety may require self-protection. But what we can do, and what we're ethically called to do, is create a space in our schools and classrooms where all students can walk in and for that day or hour, take off the crushing weight of their armor, hang it on a rack, and open their hearts to truly being seen. We must be guardians of a space that allows students to breathe and be curious and explore the world and be who they are without suffocation. They deserve one place where they can rumble with vulnerability and their hearts can exhale. And what I know from the research is that we should never underestimate the benefit to a child of having a place to belong, even one where they can take off that armor. It can, and often does, change the trajectory of their life.
So it is with heartfelt gratitude that we extend our appreciation to you as a school board for your recognition of the importance of social emotional learning as a foundation and as an accelerator pedal for student academic success in Everett Public Schools. So we can take this opportunity now for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for truly exceptional presentation. I just am reflecting here on when I first joined the school board, and there was talk of social emotional learning, and I feel like we've done a really good job of moving it forward, but this year in particular it has made it very powerful and very meaningful. And when I hear things like building a vocabulary for students and all of us to have these conversations and giving feelings the opportunity to become part of the curriculum, to me just takes it to a whole new level. And so I just am so appreciative of this work that we're doing. I just know how critical it is right now. I don't have any questions. I'm going to turn it over to directors or student representatives. If anyone does, just please flag me down or let Director Nichols.
I just wanted to say just a general comment. Thank you for engaging this and leading this team. As a clinical social worker, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to adults who say things like, I shouldn't be angry about this, or I feel guilty for being happy, and they don't know how to just accept emotions as emotions, and they don't know how to access that vocabulary within themselves. And so the earliest we can start, the less I'll stop seeing patients in practice without the ability to communicate how they feel. It's just such an important skill that is desperately needed. So thank you very much.
Director Berg.
I kind of wanted to echo that and just say thank you for the presentation. And it's it's really meaningful. And well, actually, first off, you know, why did you leave Jackson? You left me. I'm just putting it out there. We miss you. Principal Ball is great, but I just want to say we miss you over there. My girls miss you. So anyway, there's that. But I'm happy you're doing the work that you are at the district. It's super neat. It's super important. And I know some of the folks that you have on your team, and they're amazing. So thank you for the presentation. That said, I just want to put it in the universe that I'm just terrified about the social emotional well-being of our kiddos in this time. And it's not anything that we're doing wrong or anything like that, but just where we are, you know, as a nation and during this public health crisis. And so what I'm really trying to figure out as a leader, right? Like, how do we meet them where they're at this moment? And I think, you know, looking at your presentation, what I'm trying to glean from it is, if you have that kid transitioning from like a tier 1 to a tier 3 or tier 2, who might be, you know, having suicidal thoughts, like, how do we jump in? How are we providing the support for them? I see suicide probably as being one of those underreported things at this moment, just because we don't have folks hands-on and eyes-on. But I guess if you could kind of walk me through what that would look like for a kiddo in that situation.
Yeah, thank you for that. The counselors, we've spent some time meeting about talking about how all the different ways that we can reach out to students. How, you know, it's obviously it's different in an in-person environment. They have much easier access, and there's also a different level of a feeling for students of privacy and confidentiality. When we're communicating over Zoom or other ways, sometimes it's hard to tell. These students are sharing the same room with maybe some of the people that are creating, you know, the very issues that they need to talk about and get support for. So our counselors are being really strategic about opening up opportunities to create individual Zoom sessions with students, and having, you know, being able to ask some questions, or even in a chat real quick to find out, you know, are you in a safe place? Is this conversation truly private? And being able to then carry on some of those conversations. You know, the counselors have kind of set up some different ways to do office hours, to meet with students as they need, right? So like you said, to meet them where they are, rather than having to always, you know, it depends on the circumstance, but to schedule appointments so they have that ability as well. But if the students feel like they have a more urgent need to have that support, the counselors are opening up as many ways as they can think of to provide that for our kids.
Okay, and there is that hands-on, like, we're getting folks who, if they need to send someone, they do it and all that stuff like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's all in place. Okay, that's good to know. I guess my last thing is just, in this time, it'd be great to come out of this, even if we're a little behind on certain like math and reading standards, but to have our kids more emotionally whole using that vocabulary that they're gaining from this process. To me, that would be a win, because I think that's what's going to stick with them beyond this, right? Like, that those are going to be the tools that are going to serve them better than you know, understanding all the various levels of pie. It's like they need to understand how to be emotionally whole to be truly successful. So just thank you for the work you're doing.
And I think, just to comment on what Tara had brought up, I think it's really important for the students themselves to be able to be heard as a group, and to be part of those solutions too. So they know what it's like to be a kid. They also know how to help. I mean, they have the ability and some of the resources from peer to peer to be able to provide some of those supports too. And so I'm excited about the work that the schools are still able to do, partnering with the ASB in order to help provide some more of the SEL support. So thank you, Tara, for that. And hi, by the way, it's good to see you too.
Thank you. Director Mitchell.
Yes, I just want to say thank you too, and it is nice to see Dave again, and just so he knows, Becca's doing really well on her last few weeks of her first semester. But I just want to thank you, and I do want to support Andrew's comments too about adults don't even know all this stuff. And I, one time during a particularly traumatic time in my life, had to get support, and my doctor was very, very kind to me, who said, Tracy, it is a sign of bravery that you came in today. not a sign of weakness. And that was the best thing he could have ever said to me. But I do appreciate this. I appreciate the student voice earlier too, hearing from students that this is not easy, that this is hard, that it is stressful, that it is traumatic. And like Director Berg said, if there are some things, some silver linings that can come out of this, some little blessings, we will take everything we can get. So thank you for expanding the team, Dr. Saltzman, or Dr. Scott, whosever decision that was, because this is making our goals years ago when we drew that the student and what is this, how do we create this whole person that graduates from our schools? So thank you.
That was Dr. Saltzman's recommendation to maintain the facilitators that you saw on Dave's, those cute little youth pictures.
That was awesome.
Yeah, can I say too that Laura looks exactly the same, and Dave, I won't comment.
It was real hair though.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, we're gonna give Director Lassane an opportunity.
Yes, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I do want to thank Dave Peters so much for your presentation. I apologize for just getting on the tail end of it, but some of the others in and out, I'm having so much problems with my connection. But I do want to say that this is a very challenging time that we're in, not only because of the pandemic and because of unknowns associated with that, but also with, I believe, the divisiveness that is in the country at this particular point in time. I have talked with several teenagers who are on the cusp of voting, and what I hear from them is that, why should I vote when my parents don't seem to care about me? Or why should I get engaged when I don't see people caring about us or caring about people in general? And that breaks my heart. That truly breaks my heart when I hear that the kids are saying certain things that adults are not realizing, that what they're doing has a big effect on their kids. And it's important that we in the school create a safe place for children to go. It's important that we listen to them and we allow them, and I thank you very much for saying, we allow them to take charge of their social emotional fitness and how they feel and how they are living, and make sure that they are healthy in that. I am so glad that we started concerns about social-emotional learning some time ago, and that we are only growing by leaps and bounds right now. And thank you so much for putting the effort and the time in that's necessary, because it couldn't have come at a greater time than what we need right now. Because not only with the pandemic, there's so much going on in the country right now that is creating divisiveness, and our kids feel like, well, why should I care? My adults don't care, or nobody cares about me. And I think we need to take hold of that, and we need to give them the support that they need so that they can be successful. And thank you so much for the presentation. I truly enjoyed the conversations, and I think we need to have more of that in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I'm going to also open it up to student representatives if you have any further comments or thoughts. Go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, so I want to echo what's been said a lot, that it's really good to hear the work that's been done behind social emotional learning, especially that opening video and the opening acknowledgments of how important it is for students. I think that's a really good step. For me, like seeing that, it's like, oh, okay, the adults are recognizing that the emotional aspect of online school is something that's really important. And I guess I have a few things to say as And I want to emphasize what I just said to clarify that what I'm about to say is not at all to say like, I think that we should completely change everything. But there's just a few from a student perspective. I think that this is one of the most important areas of decision making at the district level where student voices should be brought in. And that's not only about their own personal pathways to social emotional learning, but also these greater decisions that are being made about how that's being implemented in classrooms and at schools. This is one of the most important places where I think there should be more student interaction before, you know, Amina and I hop onto a Zoom call and listen to the presentation. I think something that would definitely benefit students would be for students to be involved in those conversations beforehand. Especially because from my own perspective and from the perspective of students I know, there's struggles with being on the computer all day. I know students who have complained about, you know, physical back problems or their eyes hurting or getting headaches from being on the computer all day, things like that. And just the psychological effect of your whole life being through a computer is something that's really hard. And so getting those perspectives from students, especially in my educational experience at Everett Public Schools, in middle school, we did the high school and beyond lessons. And in high school, we've done the social emotional learning lessons. And in my personal opinion, I think that some students would agree with me, something that's important is making sure that those conversations are authentic and they're bringing in students who don't normally feel like expressing their opinions or feel like their feelings aren't out of the ordinary when in reality it's something that's concerning. Because especially in my past, when I've done these activities in classroom settings, it can feel like it's kind of, you're just watching a video and then doing an activity. And it can start to feel a little bit ingenuine. Whereas this year I've had my math teacher sit us down on a Friday and just say, today's gonna be a mental health day. Everyone, like, let's go around and share just how you're feeling. And that's felt a lot more genuine. And that's felt like a space where students are interacting with each other and you have an adult there that's listening. And that wasn't through any sort of video that we were watching or any sort of lesson we were getting or any sort of activity that we were doing. And it felt a lot more authentic. And so that's just one example of how I think that getting students' perspectives on what is effective for their social emotional learning, because you guys obviously have it down and you've done a lot of work and we're really thankful for that on the importance of social emotional learning and what it is and how important it is to be implementing that. But the actual implementation of that is like the really difficult piece that you're going to need a lot of student feedback and a lot of student involvement in making those decisions on how to put that into our schools. So I went a little bit long there than I meant to, but.
Thank you for sharing that though. I think that I saw Mr. Peters taking some notes there and
yeah.
I think that your comments resonate with all of us actually. So appreciate that. Amina, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, everyone said everything already spot on. Tara, spot on from a student's perspective. But yeah, everything was already said.
Okay. And I will say, Tara's comments, much of what you said applies actually to the grown-ups too, the adults here, you know, sitting in front of computers and eye sores and back sores, some of us more than others, but so I appreciate you reiterating that. And I think we are all very much just a little bit more fragile these days than we have been in the past, and looking forward to moving on beyond this virus. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this presentation. Thank you again for the presentation and for everyone's input. We're now going to move to section 11.0, which is our information and discussion section of our meeting. And item 11.01 is a capital levy planning update. This is a continuation of a conversation that we started, and I believe Mr. Gunn is going to be presenting.
Thank you. I will go ahead and get the presentation set up. Are you able to see that right now on the screen?
Yes.
All right, so thank you very much. So tonight is an opportunity to have a conversation as a follow-up to a conversation that we had with the board at its August summer workshop. At that time, we talked about, we allowed the board to debrief about the recent bond proposal that did not pass, and also to share some of the comments that about their perceptions and ask questions about future planning for bonds and levies. One of the major takeaways from that board's summer workshop was that there was really no interest on the part of the board in running a capital bond in the next year or so, due to the high validation rates that will come with the coming presidential election, among other factors. But one of the unanswered questions from that workshop had to do about when we would want to consider running a capital levy. So our agenda item tonight is intended to close that loop, to have a conversation and provide some information to the board, and then ask the board to provide guidance to staff around those questions. So at the board's summer workshop, we provided to the board information about the efforts over the previous, say year and a half, where we had worked with the Capital Bond Planning Committee, the guiding principles that had been developed for the bond planning, the framework that we use to develop bonds and levies, and then also information about recent elections, both levies and bonds, potential bond and levy cycles, and then the potential timing and sizes and possible tax rates for future capital levies. One of the things that we've done is in board docs, in the agenda item, we provided a link to the materials presented to the board at that workshop. And then subsequent to that workshop, we followed up in a Friday report with more information to the board, giving them the board members current and projected tax rates, and then answered some questions about the potential scope and size of future capital levies. The reason I went through all that on this slide is I'm trying not to have to present all of that information again, because it's quite a large volume of work, and it also is necessary for the next couple of slides, the understanding of these. So what I'm going to do now is talk to the board about focus in particular on the timing for a capital levy. Along the way, we'll need to touch on the educational programs and operations levy, as well as the capital bond timing. So on the upper part of the slide here, what I show is the schedule for bonds and levies, assuming that there's a capital levy in 2021. On the lower part of the slide is the same schedule, but assuming the capital levy is in 2022. So I'll kind of go over the implications of those and the reasons for some of the assumptions that we built into these. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that the educational programs and operations levy, those are four-year levies. They're not capital levies. They actually benefit the general fund, the district's general fund. They could be shorter than 4 years, but they can be no longer than 4 years. So the current educational programs and operations levy expires in 2022. So the earliest that you can run one to replace that is in 2022, because you can only have one educational programs and operations levy in place at a time. So the assumption that we built into this conversation is that we would be running an educational programs and operations levy to replace the expiring one in 2022. Okay, so that's the first assumption. Now I'm going to go down to the capital bond. And you can see that in both scenarios, I have shown the capital bond being proposed in 2024. That is basically an assumption. It could be run, it could be run really any time. It could be run in 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. It could even be run in 2021. But remember, one of the primary takeaways from the board's August workshop discussion was that the board was not interested in running a bond in 2021. So that's why we show it out over time. So anyway, now let's go to the capital levy. Again, the upper part of the slide shows capital levy in 2021. On the next slide, we're going to get into more of the pros and cons about which of the 2 years, either 2021 or 2022, to run a capital levy. And we'll also get into some conversation about which election to run in either of those 2 years. One thing I'm going to talk about now is the timing. The elections, you may remember, there are 4 possible election dates in a year: February, April, August, and November. February is the traditional school election day because it's the first one of the year and it gives you the most opportunities for running one again if you need to. There's a lot of discussion that has gone into our decisions over time about February and April. And I would say that the school district has run elections in both of those elections. We've also, as you know, recently run one in August as well. But traditionally, the February election is the one that is selected for the Educational Programs and Operations Levy. And the reason for that is primarily because, again, it's the first opportunity we have in the year. Also, it's because if we wait and run that levy on the April ballot, then we actually have to ask the board to approve a reduced educational program, and the district staff has to prepare that, of course. And then we actually have to send out reduction in force notices to employees covered under the EEA bargain before election day. So if we run the election in February and pass it, we don't have to do any of those. If we don't pass it in February and then we have to run it in April, then we do have to go through all that. Or alternately, if we pass on the February election and wait till April to run it for the first time, then we'll have to go through all that. Needless to say, we would rather not go through all that. It's a lot of work and it is going to raise a lot of anxiety, and it may well be not necessary because historically we've been very successful in passing educational program and operations levies. In my entire time here with the school district, I've never seen a time when we have failed to pass twice in a year. I have seen the first attempt fail, but I've never seen both attempts fail. So we've been very successful. There is a 50% approval threshold for educational programs and operations levy. So that covers the election day and the election year of the educational programs and operations levy. So it's really a strong assumption on our part that we're going to run an educational programs and operations levy in February of 2022. That's a strong assumption. Okay, now I'm going to go to the capital levy discussion. And the first upper part of the slide has to do with the year, and then the lower half has to do with the election date. I will say right off that I'm focusing the election date on the February or the April elections, just because historically we've not wanted to wait until August or November to run our levies or bonds. We've every time that I can remember, our first option was to run in February or April. So we focused on those two elections. Okay, so we've talked about whether to run a capital levy in 21 versus 22. And I'm going to go through some of the implications of each of those choices. In 2021, it would result, if we ran it and passed it, a capital levy in 21, that would result in a 1-year double up on the collections of capital levies. And that's because you may remember there is currently a capital levy in place that expires in 22, along with the educational programs and operations levy. But with capital levies, you can actually have more than one in place at a time. So if the board wanted to, it could run, and if we passed a capital levy in 21, there would be a 1-year period of time where it would be the last year of the preceding capital levy. It was actually passed in 2016. And then it would be the first year of collections for the new capital levy. So there'd be a 1-year overlap. It wouldn't have many more implications other than that in that respect. Also, if we're going to run a capital levy in 21, we need a fairly quick board approval to do so. If we're going to run in February of 21, for example, we need the board's approval of the resolution placing that on the ballot. We need that approved in November, like next month. If we're going to run in the April election, then we can actually wait until about February to get board approval. But nevertheless, it is a fairly quick turnaround. And also, here's the big implication. If we ran a capital levy in 21, it would not align with the timing of the educational programs and operations levy. And so it would add an extra election because, again, we're making a strong assumption we're going to run an EP&O levy in February of 22. So now I'm going to move down to the implications for 2022. It avoids a double up on the capital levy collections because we wouldn't have the new one go into play in force until the previous one expired. It would also, and this was a big conversation at the board's workshop in August, it would allow more time for the district, the board members, and everyone to assess the status of COVID on our community and on our economy, and to assess the stability of our economy and how sensitive our community would be to considering a ballot proposal like this. And then finally, the 2022 date aligns with our EP&O levy election date. So now I'm going to quickly go down to the February versus April. Again, February is the most common election date for school-related issues. It aligns with the preferred election for the EP&O levy. It also, if it's proposed and does not pass, it would allow us April as a backup election date, which again keeps us away from having to wait until August to do that, or November. Going to the April election, it allows more time after winter break, and I'll go over that here in just a minute on the next slide, but it also has the implication that the backup election dates, there are still two of them in August and November. It does not align with the EP&O levy election date, so it adds an extra election. And also, this has the implication that the ballots actually are mailed out by the county during spring break to the community members. So the next slide here, the next two slides actually go over some specific dates. The first one shows the elections in 2021, both February and April. And so you can see the dates. This one would require, again, an approval by the board at the November 24th board meeting. The board resolutions authorizing election items are due to the county 60 days before election day. So we could wait until early December, but November is the common date that we use for the board approval. Winter break from December 21 to January 21. I'll say January 21 is the Friday of the last day of winter break. So the Monday is actually the 4th of January, which leaves about 17 days between the 4th and January 21 when the ballots are mailed out. So that's not a lot of time, but it is actually more time than you'll see with the April election. Because on the April election, the April 9th is the last day of spring break, which is Friday. So the Monday, the first day of workday after that is April 12th, which is 4 days after the ballots have mailed out. So those are the election times in February, in 2021 that we've presented to you for consideration. And now I'm just going to mention the two same election times in 2022. And it's a very similar picture. It's just that the approval would be about a year from now, a year and a month from now for board approval. And it would still give you about 17 days after winter break, before the first work day after winter break, before the ballots are mailed out. And then in the April election, it is actually, the ballots would be mailed out during spring break. So with that, I've been talking a lot now, and my hope is that the board will have some ideas and thoughts and considerations, and ultimately, again, we would like to have some guidance from the board about their preference for the year and the month of the next capital levy election.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn, for the presentation. At this time, if we could pull down the presentation, and we will open it up to directors for questions or comments. Director Mitchell.
Yes, Mike, thank you so much for that presentation. And I'm actually going to just propose that we wait until 2022 first, because of potential campaign fatigue after this election next month, and because we failed our bond. I just want to make sure that the community is clear that we're not asking, like, moving things into capital levy that has a lower voting threshold, or also the misperception of having two capital levies at the same time. So just, I appreciate the work you've done, but would just appreciate, I think it makes sense to me to have, instead of a bond this year that failed, then a capital next year, then an EP&O the next year, that we just do the two together in 2022 is how I'm sort of really thinking about this.
Thank you.
Mike, this is Pam. I have a couple questions that I would like to ask. I noticed on your sheet, your information about future capital levies information package that you sent along. You talked about, is it possible and at what threshold would we need to have a high school STEM project? And you mentioned that a 2021 3-year levy of $88 million would fund the high school STEM projects that were in the 2020 bond proposal while still maintaining the current tax rate of $4.88. Are you telling us that all of the STEM projects from Everett High School, Cascade, and Jackson projects would be included in that $88 million for a 3-year levy?
That might be a Mr. Moore question, or both.
Yeah,
I think what your estimated cost of those projects is really what my concern is.
Yeah, so I did work closely with Mr. Moore on development of all this information. So I think probably either one of us can answer, but maybe I'll jump in. The information that we provided you had a number of different possible scenarios. And I think that was one of them. And the pricing that we used from that were taken right off of the cost estimates that we used to prepare the bond proposal. So we're confident of those estimated costs and the assumptions that we use to produce the anticipated tax rates.
So you're pretty confident with those dollar figures. Also, you had mentioned a 6-year levy of $150 million would fund construction of the maintenance and safety building improvement. That does not include the elementary schools, does it not?
I do not. Or believe that. I do not believe it does. And I will say, though, that we are prepared at the appropriate time to bring forward to you even more updated information about tax rates and proposed projects and what the how that would all work. So again, tonight we're hoping that what we do is kind of get from the board guidance about the timing of the year and the month of the election, and then based on that guidance, we'll bring back information at the appropriate time. Because frankly, if I provided you information now about that and you didn't want us to run the election until a year from now, then that information would have to be updated then anyway.
I understand, because there's cost of increased cost over time, as well as any other things that that the district feels that we need to take action on immediately. So I do understand that, but my concern was just the cost of the STEM programs. If the cost of the STEM programs in the figure for all 3 of the high schools was $88 million.
Yes, I believe
that was my concern. Okay, thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Director Nichols.
So I'm also inclined to wait until 2022 as well. My only concern or question is it going to hurt us at all to run an EPO and a capital levy at the same time?
I can provide a little bit of information about that. We covered this question to some degree in the, I believe in the workshop in the summer. And the information that we have from our bond council is that when we run, historically, when school districts, and they looked across the state and looked at the times when 2 capital measures were run at the same time, they do both tend to have a lower yes vote. Just it seems like people, if given a choice, they'll say yes to one and no to the other. So that may well happen if we were to propose to run 2 levies on the same election. But the other part of that is the threshold. Since the passage threshold is only 50% for both levies, it's very likely that we would be able to achieve that even with the reduced support for running 2 levies. So, I can say that from here. That's my belief on that.
So would it give us any advantage to, say, run the EPO in February and the capital in April? Or do you feel like we
to that, Andrew? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, no, I know
we pay for our elections. Yeah. I
know there's a con, but so what I'm asking is for passing sake, for passing these levies, is do we offset them so that we don't have our hand out for 2 things at the same time? Or is it just kind of, well, get it done in February, and if we don't get it done in February, then at least we have April, August, and November to go through?
Yeah.
I would address that to say that The trade-off is that actually I think there's a cost to both. I think when you run two measures on the same ballot, there is some erosion in yes votes, as Mr. Gunn has pointed out. But I think that when you run two measures back to back, I think there's also voter fatigue. And in addition to the costs that the district spends on the election. And special elections can often be more expensive because the cost of the election is shared amongst all those who are on the ballot. And so in special elections, it's usually just a few entities that are trying to pass a measure. So I think it's a flip of a coin, whether you run them together or you space them out. And for the sake of simplicity, my preference would be to run them together. It makes it easier in the messaging and helping people understand, what the measures are for.
So, and my final question on this is, do we actually have to, so if we're going to run both of these in 22, do we actually have to wait until November to put forth a resolution? Can we give you the resolution early so that we have more time to work on everything else? It kind of seems silly just to wait till the last moment and try to pack in all that campaigning towards the end of it.
Yes, in fact, we have a board workshop scheduled for June of 2021 to talk about future capital bond and levy planning. And that would be the next time when we would be scheduled right now to come before you. And we could certainly bring a conversation for you at that time. And I will say too, that frankly, right now, I actually don't need to know if you want to go in February or April, as long as I know that the year is 22. Because right now, again, we're scheduled to come back to you in June, and we would just do that if you're not planning to go with a levy in 21. So we don't need the decision on April or February tonight. I just need to know if we're trying to shoot for 2021.
So I had a couple of comments. Is it okay, Caroline? Sorry. 2022 makes the most sense, and February makes, to me, between both of those dates. But that said, I think kind of to Andrew's point, maybe we use this time intentionally. I love the process that we went through on the capital bond planning, engaging the community. And so I think taking this opportunity, maybe post-COVID, as we roll into more of a sustainable new normal, maybe engaging the community. And I know it's unconventional, but I think we're in unconventional times. And I think if we're going to go out, the next time we go out to ask the community for money, even if it's just a re-up that'll, make their tax rate stable, I think we need input. Because I think things have just changed. Everything has changed about what people want from education, how they want it done. And I think it's really up to us as leaders to ask the community, what do you want? And maybe it's just what we thought, but I think taking this time to ask them will be really, really important. I don't think it's going to look the same as what we thought a levy would look like. What we think it'll look like right now is not going to look the same in 2022. It just won't. Education is going to be completely different in terms of what the community wants from us.
Thank you. I would concur with many of those comments, Director Berg. I think that the unpredictability of the environment that we're in right now, and the fact that people are struggling financially, it to me just doesn't make sense to put a measure before voters when in fact we don't know what our world's going to look like post-COVID, and to wait until 2022 to have a clearer picture, to me just makes so much more sense than rushing back into another measure at this time. I also completely agree that taking time, I agree with both Director Nichols and Director Berg that one, taking the time to get the community input, I think was just so valuable and quite successful on our last bond attempt. And we had tremendous support. And I think that was in part because we really got the community input that we needed. And then we also didn't wait till the last minute, to Director Nichols' point, to help our community understand why the funding was important and what it was going to go towards. So my goal, or my preference would be to wait till 2022, and whether we run in February or April, I would prefer to keep the two measures together. And traditionally February is when districts go out because of the EP&O levy and the funding of teacher salaries and such. So I'm gonna, I didn't ask our student representatives if they had any comments on the topic or would like to offer anything. I'm not seeing any hand waving, so I'll throw it back to directors and ask if you have any final questions or comments. Mr. Gunn, do you feel like you have what you need to move forward?
Yes, I do. Excuse me. Yes, I do. And I thank you all very much for your comments, and we will plan accordingly.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your information and providing that. So at this time, oh, we're right at 5:30. That makes the math easy. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and I hope everyone has an opportunity to get a bite to eat or refresh their drink or whatever is needed. And we will, oh, thank you. Thank you. It was so tiny on the top of my iPad. You're right, 6:30. So we will reconvene at 6:45. Thank you.
Hey, I'm glad you got lights on. Now I know Renee's not in the dark either.
So true. Renee's not in the dark anymore.
Just so everybody knows, we also suffer from the worst cell phone coverage in the area.
It's so true. This whole morning I was on Zoom with Emerson Elementary instructional review, and it was terrible. It kept going out, in and out, and in and out. It was awful. The trees, though, in my backyard, I was worried for a moment there. I was truly worried for a moment. I said, should I run real quick if I see one leaning too close to the house or what? It was pretty bad.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. We're going to continue on with our meeting if everyone's ready. Let's see, do I see all my directors on board here? There they are. Okay. We are going to continue with our information and discussion item. And 11.02 is some background information on a land acknowledgement, and Dr. Boughton is going to be our presenter. Please take it away, Shelley.
Great, thank you so very much. Let me just share my screen here. So hopefully you are seeing my PowerPoint display. And I just want to say thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here tonight. I really am excited to share some of the information, the background information around land acknowledgement and what that means. In my previous experience, I've worked pretty closely with members of the Tulalip tribes in a previous school district in helping to bring land acknowledgement to our organizations. And so I'm excited to share some background and information today with each of you around what land acknowledgement is and how it can be used. So to begin, I want to just share that a land acknowledgement or a land recognition is a statement that's made at the opening of events that honors the Indigenous people of the area. It's usually a short statement of acknowledgement, a show of respect, and a way to help recognize Indigenous people's history and culture. Much of the work around around land acknowledgement was actually done within reconciliation organizations, which were helping to repair the historical trauma of Native and Indigenous people in the United States, and also the First Nations in Canada. And by honoring those who inhabited the land before us, we are able to help build a deeper understanding around the history of our land, its Indigenous people, as well as set the tone for honoring all people who have been historically marginalized or underserved within our system. So a land acknowledgement shares a commitment to honoring Native communities. It educates all within a community in local history, and it can demonstrate a sustained commitment to building an authentic community relationship and an advance of equity for all students and participants within an organization. You may know that land acknowledgement has been kind of an emerging and this compelling desire to acknowledge the events of the past so that we can work towards a stronger and healthier future. You may see land acknowledgements or land recognitions at the beginning of events in many different organizations, but it's really about honoring those who come before us, and we are expressing that sincere acknowledgement of the injustices and harms experienced by the Indigenous peoples of Washington State and the need for the continued healing. It's really important to recognize why we do a land acknowledgement, because we want to make sure that we're not appropriating Native and Indigenous culture by including it just to check a box on an equity marquee, or really making sure that we're really using land acknowledgement as a way to honor Native people as a form of respect and deference. And this is really a commitment. Oops, sorry, let me go back one. This is actually a commitment in establishing new relationships that are embedded in mutual recognition and respect that will help us to forge a brighter future for our organization and our constituents. I want to share with you an example of a land acknowledgement, and you'll see many of these signs up in many of our school buildings. Joy Grant, our Director of Equity and Access, has done an amazing job at sharing these with our schools and our buildings. And you'll see this very bright yellow Coast Salish artwork by Ty Juvenile. He's a Tulalip tribal member who lives in Marysville. And this is actually a piece of art that has been published by the United States Department of Arts and Culture. And it's a land recognition sign. And since we are on Coast Salish tribal land, that's the name that we've added to our signs. And this is just an example of a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, or the Snohomish and Tulalip peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community. So many of our school buildings are already participating in a land acknowledgement. They're sharing a similar statement at the beginning of their events or assemblies, virtual or otherwise. And every school has got one of these signs expressing that they're on Coast Salish tribal land in each of their buildings. So moving forward, land acknowledgement is a very respectful thing to do. And it's a way to help all of our Indigenous people in our area move forward and heal from some of the tragedy and trauma that they've had in the United States and in Canada. That's all of the information that I have this evening. I wanted to share a brief picture of a student at Quilceda Tulalip Elementary School and one of their full regalia in one of their events, and take any questions that you might have that I can answer about land acknowledgement.
Thank you for that presentation and the background information, which I think is quite helpful. I wanted to ask quickly, this is really maybe more of a curriculum question, but you're probably the right person for that. The Land Before Time, I believe, is the name of the curriculum that
since time immemorial.
Thank you, since time immemorial. When was that first implemented in our schools? It's been very recent, is my...
I believe that it was in 2014, but I would actually need to go back and take a look at the actual adoption this being my first year as Chief Academic Officer, I don't have that one off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know if, does Dr. Scott?
And I could defer to Peter. Peter might have more information on that.
Yeah, I think the introduction of Since Time Immemorial came around that time. I think it's not been since the last few years. I want to say probably 2016. And I think there was a runway for that legislation to take effect. So I want to say it was more around 2016, 2017, where we started to convene. In fact, Georgia Lindquist was a convener locally with the Tulalip tribes and others. So I want to say around 2016 that work started in earnest. The professional development, curricular tools, and that ongoing cohort of interlocal folks. And
I know that OSPI moved forward with Since Time Immemorial in 2015, and so 2016 might be the appropriate time frame. But the work that Georgia Lindquist in the past has done with the Tulalip tribes has actually refined. They've done a Since Time Immemorial is a statewide curricula. However, Everett Public Schools has partnered with the Tulalip tribes in developing a more specific units and lessons that are specific to the Tulalip tribes and some Coast Salish just to the north of us.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful to know. Directors, are there questions? And I would request if we could close the presentation for the moment while I can see directors. Thank you. Are there questions? Director Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this came up at the summer workshop, but I kind of supported it because this is something WASDA does, especially in our region up in Bellingham. When I go to meetings up there, the board member up in Ferndale will always lead one of these. And it is just, I think, a very respectful way of recognizing the land that we do sit on. So that land acknowledgement. But as we are trying to increase our inclusiveness and everything too, I think it is just a sign of respect for the community. You know, its place in our meetings, you know, it would be, and who would present it, I think would still be a question, but I think it is just a sign of respect.
So I just have a question. So thank you for the presentation, Dr. Bowden. And kind of off of what Director Mitchell was saying, traditionally when it seems like when I see it done at meetings, it's done, you know, similar to that flag salute at the beginning, right? Like it's not necessarily, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, it's not necessarily a cultural presentation more so than a literal acknowledgement of the land that we're on. So normally like the person who, you know, is leading the meeting, let's say, or somebody, you know, on the dais just reads it out of a sign of respect versus like a production, right? I mean, so I guess, am I correct in that? Okay, so if we, for instance, were to adopt it before our meetings, we could do it in a similar fashion. So it would maybe take 30 seconds or so. I mean, it wouldn't, I mean, you know, like I'm just trying to just make our mindset, okay, perfect. So it would just be something that we could do out of respect at each and every meeting and not necessarily be like a cultural, yeah, thank you.
It's typically just a short announcement, often led by perhaps an Indigenous person of the area if they are available. But most of the time, if it is an organization such as this, it's done in a way that is just an act of deference to the people of the land. And so it is, I mean, I think it probably took me about 27 seconds to read that acknowledgement, and you can tailor that to the people, you know, you could say specifically if you wanted to call out the Coast Salish people like we do, but it is just a way of quickly honoring and remembering those who've come before us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was really informative.
Yeah. Are there any other questions I can answer?
Director Lassane?
Well, I don't have any questions regarding it. I think it's a good idea to incorporate it. I don't believe it takes up very much time. I like the fact that it does recognize the indigenous people that came before us, and we're very respectful of being on their land. You know, we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. So that's pretty good. I like that thought and that acknowledgement. So I don't think it would take too much time at the beginning of the meeting to acknowledge it.
Dr. Bowden, do you have I feel as if I have first heard of land acknowledgements in very recent times. When did these begin, and sort of how do you see, what was the history of why they came to, for example, our board meeting tonight?
Sure. So typically they actually started first in the First Nations in Canada. And it was actually part of some of their Truth and Reconciliation Acts that they have made, where for centuries, Native peoples on this continent were displaced, relocated. Often in Washington State, Tulalip actually was a Native American Indian boarding school, where young children who were living on the reservation were actually removed from their homes, and they were sent to schools, and often had very deplorable conditions. And there was just a lot of significant trauma for the Native people. And so during that time, and that happened throughout the United States, and I believe that a lot of it began with the Wabanaki tribe in Maine, where they went through the Truth and Reconciliation Acts to actually find ways to help Indigenous people of that area heal. And it's become widespread throughout the nation in ways where organizations and local organizations and communities who are wishing to help Native peoples begin to heal through some of that trauma have recognized that we are not native to this land. We have emigrated to this land, and there were people who were here before that. And so truly, there's a lot of healing that we need to do through our Indigenous people. There's a lot of harm that's been done to them over centuries. And so this was one small and simple way of being able to honor people and to recognize they were here prior to our arrival, and it helps them to heal. So when I worked with Marysville School District, and I worked with members of the Tulalip tribes there, it was a really compelling way, and it was a very small way of being able to help people start to heal. I don't know about you, but I was 43 when I learned about Indian boarding schools. And I grew up in the middle of Illinois, which was very close to a Native American reservation. And I didn't know what happened in this nation. I didn't know what some of the government agencies had done. I didn't know about forced sterilization and some of the things that had happened to people in this nation. And I think part of land acknowledgement helps us to recognize as a people that there were things that we probably need to really honor that happened in history that we don't know a lot about. And so my experiences in working with tribal members and working with the school district there has really helped me to understand why this is such an important statement to make. And it's becoming very popular and mainstream. But I think one of the most important pieces that I would urge is that the why behind we do land acknowledgement is the most important piece. You don't want this to be a cultural appropriation of somebody else's work. And so truly understanding that this is an important way that's helping people to heal is why land acknowledgement is pretty important.
And Caroline, can I add, because it is part of the students' curriculum, I think it's really a good idea, like Shelley said, for us to add it, not as an appropriation, but for us to really reflect as adults on this, that I didn't learn about this either until I read a fictionalized book about, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was fictional history, historic fiction, but about something that happened in Oklahoma. But it's something that I never knew about. but I think it really is, as adults serving this district, really how do we lead the children that are learning the same curriculum?
Carol, Director Mason, I think you're still muted.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to say I really appreciate your history with this and background, because I think my biggest fear is I want to know that it is meaningful to us and to the people that we're serving, rather than this is sort of, you know, what everyone's doing at the beginning of meetings. And that's my biggest fear. And I just want it to be a genuine, and I trust in your knowledge and background and history with this. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the board.
Well, and I would like to just say thank you for the opportunity to share. And I would like to actually say thank you to the members of the Tulalip tribes who have helped to educate me, and not to appropriate the language, but language was something that was taken from Native Americans when boarding schools happened. And so I would like to raise my hands and say Tuglitsi, which is Lushrutsi for thank you for the opportunity to share tonight. And I want to tip my hat and say thank you to the Tulalip tribal members who helped to support this work. Chelsea Craig, who is an amazing cultural leader in that community, helped me to really learn what this was all about and helped me to teach others what this is all about as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Student representatives or any other directors, any further questions or comments? Director Lassane.
I'd like to also comment. I heard what Tracy just said, which makes it very, very important. We have a requirement in order to teach, you know, since time immemorial, history of our native tribes. And it's very telling because that is a requirement in our state law. And this fulfills some of that, because what we can do is use this as a teaching tool, and as well as connecting the dots as to why we're doing this, which opens up another avenue of why we're teaching the curriculum that we are teaching. And I think it's just one stepping stone to doing that.
Thank you for your comments. And to Director Mitchell's comments, I feel like this is a year when we're all learning a whole lot about cultures. And I just appreciate the opportunity and this moment in time when we can do this. So if there's no further questions or discussion, I'm going to thank Dr. Boughton for the presentation. And we will go ahead and move forward to section 12.0, which is unfinished business. And tonight we have no items of unfinished business, which brings us to new business. And the first item under new business is 13.01 board meeting agenda structure. This is a conversation that we started at our summer workshop and never came to resolution as to whether we want to change any items in this would be the regular board meeting structure. And I just want to preface this by saying that any item in our structure is up for conversation in terms of how we want these meetings to go. And that at the end of it, if we have general consensus on the agenda structure, we'll go ahead and vote to approve the new agenda structure. And so with that, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to discussion to directors for any items that they would like to bring forward. Director Mitchell.
So if we wanted to add the land acknowledgement, is this the time that we would suggest adding it?
It would be.
So I would like to suggest adding it. I don't know if I need to do that motion now or at the end.
Yeah, it's not a motion. We're just talking about the whole structure of the meeting at this point in time, where we would like to place things, how the timing of different items and such. So, Dr. Boughton, do you know if you were to add a land acknowledgement to a meeting such as ours, where it might appropriately be placed?
That's definitely your decision, but it would be most appropriate at the beginning of the meeting. There are some places who do the flag salute and they'll go right into a land acknowledgement, or they'll do a land acknowledgement and into the flag salute. So it's really up to you. The most important thing about land acknowledgement is that you're doing that, right? So I think anywhere at the top of the meeting, the board chair would likely do that. That's what I've seen it in other school districts in the past, where a board chair or a designated director would choose to do the land acknowledgement, typically either before or after the flag salute.
Okay, thank you.
I would like, if we were to add it in the meeting agenda, I would like someone to look into the positioning of the flag salute. And I would like someone to be able to state how it should be done. It's the same as if you were to carry certain flags in. You need to set the precedent, and you need to make sure that the precedent is followed. So we need that research, so that even though, Shelley, you mentioned it can go either before or after, we need to make sure that we're doing it correctly.
Well, I would propose that we lose the flag salute altogether in deference to the land acknowledgement. And as we talked about during the retreat and some of my follow-up emails, the flag salute is, it's really a misnomer. It's very problematic in various ways when we just had this whole conversation about equity, inclusion, how this work is important in our work, social emotional learning, all of these things that we discussed and we all agree are good things, yet we're talking about a very problematic ceremony that is not inclusive. It actively excludes folks within our community, that we continue to do for some unknown reason. And really, it's something that causes real harm to people. So just to give everyone kind of a background of what's going on, the Pledge of Allegiance, as it were, was originally created in the 1930s, I think, by Francis Bellamy, who was selling magazine subscriptions, and they were giving out free flags to every person who subscribed to a magazine. And this was a man who decried immigrants as being substandard, as subhuman. And then later on, it got adopted, it got picked up by, it was, I think, the American Legion and a couple other groups, national groups, came in, and they really wanted our children to be indoctrinated into this patriotism. Instead of just being proud of where they're from and a part of their country, they had to have some sort of indoctrination ceremony. And so you started seeing a lot of laws coming up where school children had to say at the beginning of the day. And then in the 50s, the Cold War happened, and they shoved an under God into that because we had to be different than the godless communists. And it's really got very problematic origins. It has little to no educational value in practice. And we're talking about something that I get the argument that you're subscribing to an ideal, right? Like, we want our country to be the best that it can be. It is not currently. We're currently dealing with the consequences of that. For Black, Indigenous people of color, they're not receiving the same justice as somebody like myself. For LGBTQI folks, they're not receiving the same type of rights and injustice as myself, as a white male, right? So we have the opportunity to do something powerful, to remove a very problematic and exclusionary act in our meetings from the agenda, and really show those in diverse and marginalized community within our district that they matter to us, that they're welcome here in our board meetings, that they're welcome in our boardroom. And that, happy to answer more questions on why I think this is problematic, but that's the big gist of it, right? Is if we're going to sit here and we're going to say inclusion is important, equity and diversity is important, then we have to stand on our word and do what is right. And right now, to me, that's getting rid of the pledge.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Directors, does anyone want to speak on behalf of the pledge?
I would like, oh, go ahead, Tracy.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I would like to say that, you know, I understand what you're saying, but I look at some of the things that I guess the flag has always stood for me. Democracy and justice and freedom and equity, they're all fragile terms. And they are terms that we the people have got to ensure. We the people have got to work towards that goal. This country is not a perfect union. It has never been a perfect union. It's always striving to become a perfect union. And I don't believe that the flag is something that you throw away from the whole term of democracy and patriotism and loyalty and honor and those types of things, because we're still working towards that democracy and that more perfect union. The one thing every immigrant does when they become a citizen, and they are very happy to do it, is they say an oath of allegiance to the Constitution, and then what they do is they say the Pledge of Allegiance. And every one of them is so happy to be able to do that because they have reached something that they didn't have before, and they are now in a country in which they're striving for that more perfect union, and a country that, through all of its faults, don't get me wrong, is still working toward that experiment of becoming a more perfect union. The flag means more to me than just a flag flying in the breeze, because not everybody in here in this meeting stood up and took an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. It's only elected people or people who hold office. Every other person doesn't do that, but they show their allegiance to the flag, the symbol of the country and the symbol of the Constitution, and the striving for a more perfect union when they say the Pledge of Allegiance. And one of the things that the state law requires is that our children be taught that. They be taught that, and they're given an example of what patriotism is, what pride is, what honor is, what integrity is, what striving for this more perfect union is, because they know what the Pledge of Allegiance is. And for us adults to do that as well, to show them that we also agree that we are striving for a more perfect union, is very important. The flag means so much more than just a piece of an emblem there. For me, it is the United States. It is something to be respected, but also I swore to an oath that I will protect your right to protest against it. I will protect your right to burn it in protest. I will protect your right not to stand and say it. So that's what the flag means to me.
So I'd like to recognize that you and I both share the same commitment, right? You and I both took the same oath as former members of the military.
We took the oath also as board members.
Right. And that's to the Constitution. To the Constitution.
But
the flag is a symbol.
You have to also say that flag is a symbol of this Constitution.
It's not. It's a symbol of the country.
Pam, can you give Director Nichols an opportunity to respond to your comments first before?
Most definitely. Go right ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I understand your passion for it because the flag means the same things to me, right? I wore that flag on my arm for almost 10 years. It meant a lot to me to see it waving, to see it in a room with me. It still does. But what I have to do is I have to divorce myself of that feeling that brings up for me. And this is not saying that the flag is bad. This is saying that the Pledge of Allegiance that we say to a flag, that was a marketing ploy that has no real bearing on patriotism, because patriotism isn't an oath. Patriotism is doing what we're doing now. It's engaging in civics. It's actively making our community better. That is patriotism. Oaths, things like that, they don't matter. They really don't matter, in the sense that it doesn't prove that you're a patriot. Anybody can say an oath. That doesn't mean that they're living those ideals. Actions speak louder than words. And to me, all this is teaching. All this is teaching in our schools is that you have to commit rote memorization and do this ceremony in order to prove that you're a true American, when there's no test to be an American. There's no oath that you have to ascribe. If you're born here, you never have to swear allegiance to anything. And there's lots of people in our community who are foreign nationals, right? They don't have any oath to our flag. There's lots of people in our community that are undocumented persons. They don't have any allegiance. They don't need to swear any allegiance to anybody. There's folks that are not receiving the same rights as many of us here on this meeting. Why would they pledge an allegiance to anything? And I want us to be better. I agree with you. We're on the same page. I want us to be better. I want us to form a more perfect union. But sometimes in order to do that, we have to recognize when an action that we're doing, even with the best of intentions, is harmful. And it's harmful to students that are marginalized, to community members that are marginalized. And we need to bear that in mind in the decisions that we make. What harm do we have if we don't do it? What is the cost of not doing it? Does that make us less patriotic? Does that make us less American? Does that make what we're doing now less important? No.
Okay, I see other directors liking to add their voice to the conversation. Director Mitchell.
Yes, I appreciate where you're at, but with your mention of students, that is RCW or WAC, so we cannot take that away from the classroom, and the ACLU has given guidance for students, and I appreciate the history of this, which I was not aware of, and my grandfather did serve in World War II and was part of the American Legion, and I guess that is something, an organization I probably could learn more about. But again, if the students have to do it by law, I do think that, again, it's not a bad practice for us to do. I was talking to somebody about this who was actually shocked that adults had to do it. He goes, doesn't that end in the 6th grade? Which was just, yeah, the WASDA does it, we do it. And the Congress does it. I mean, the legislature does it. But with that education, I don't think it is something that we could take out now, because what will the Everett Herald say? What will the people say about the school board is no longer doing the Pledge of Allegiance? And your explanation is reasonable, but I think there would be a lot of education to the community about this if we were to take away an act that a lot of people do see in a way opposite yours. And since we have to serve all, yes, I appreciate the fact we have to serve all, and we have to respect all, but I just, again, if the students have to do it by law, then maybe we need to do it too. And then, but if there could be a campaign to educate the community, educate the legislators about why this is inappropriate, then maybe we can do that as a second step. But I am just concerned about, any kind of an uneducated public about this activity.
So first off, I want to reassure you that we're not talking about taking this out of schools. An RCW is an RCW that takes other, we have to lobby for it. I would have to lobby for it if that's something that we wanted to change. And, it's just because something is legal doesn't mean it's moral, right? And just because something is moral doesn't mean it's legal. This is kind of like...
Yeah, that's not part of this discussion, please.
It's completely part of this discussion. it's, to me, it's not moral to make somebody say an oath. And that all children, so this is kind of the other double side to this, right? Is that nobody can be forced to say this. Nobody, and even in school, like we have to provide the opportunity by the RCW, but everybody has the right to sit down, to not participate, all these other things. So if they have those rights in general, why are we still doing it? To me, it's kind of like prayer in meetings, right? So
I'm going to weigh in and ask that if Director Berg has comments, that she add her voice. Would either student representative prefer to say a few words? Amina?
Yeah, with the pledge, learned about it in kindergarten, I'm pretty sure. And to be honest, when I was younger, I didn't know what it really meant. I just said it because I was kind of told to. I would say when I learned the meaning, and when I really sat down and looked at the lyrics, or if you may call them that, I decided that it didn't really represent my community. Of course, I'm a strong advocate for any minority group, a strong advocate, whether that may be whether I receive backlash for it. Yeah, but when I looked down at the lyrics, and the one part which really kind of changed my mind was the liberty and justice for all. And this was in place for a long time. That statement was in place for a long time. And to this day, it is not liberty and justice for all. And I think we all know that, and I think it's time for us to acknowledge that. For me, and I know my peers, and I know most kids from Cascade, most club members, we no longer stand for the pledge just because the pledge doesn't really stand for us. So in my opinion, I don't stand for the pledge, but that's just for my situation.
Director Mason, I will say something, and thank you, Amina, for sharing that, because I've heard anecdotally from students just kind of what you shared. I just think, I'm rarely at a loss for words, but I think tonight it's really hard. I really want to focus on.
Well, they can all vote because.
Getting. Oh, sorry. I just want to focus on hopefully getting the land acknowledgement. I think this discussion is robust. And it's a show of democracy. I really would love to get the land acknowledgement in place as kind of that, as Dr. Bowden said, kind of that healing process, because there's just so much hurt, I think, and I think moving us forward towards healing would be awesome. And then having discussions about what that means as a community, I think would be appropriate.
So the state of Washington is one of 45 states that requires the Pledge of Allegiance. And I really appreciate Director Nichols bringing this to our attention, because it did give me an opportunity to dive deeper into the history of the pledge. I both read the materials that he provided and then did some research on my own, including the entire Wikipedia statement. And I'm not necessarily sure I agree with Director Nichols' history, the entire history that he is sharing on how it came to be and why it is today. I do have a difficult time as a leader of 27 schools that require the pledge and require a flag to appear in each classroom to not also recite the pledge. So that's my opinion. I would like to leave it in the agenda as is.
May I add a few more things? One of the things in my research that I did regarding the flag itself, it goes back to the flag. It goes back to the Flag Day of June 14, 1777, in which people stood for the flag presentation and provided an opportunity they did not have at that time, the Pledge of Allegiance as we now hear it. At that particular point in time, it was a flag that, a saying that was much different than what we are saying right now, but it still was a pledge of allegiance to the flag. At that time, it was the 13 stripes and alternating red and white stripes with a union of 13 stars. So it goes back much further than 1900. It goes back to 1777. And the reason why they stood for the flag and they said a different pledge was this was the first time that they said a pledge of allegiance that was to a country and not to a person, not to the king. And so this was one of the reasons why the Pledge of Allegiance became so important, because they were saying their pledge to the country, to the goals and the thing that the flag stood for at the country at the time, the beginning time, the we the people time. I mean, it has still been an experiment. It's been an experiment since the country was first started, and it hasn't been all the people. One of the things that was made clear is if we're going to disregard a lot of things of the past. Now, there are certain things that I truly do believe they should disregard, but we'd have to start with disregarding the name of Washington State. When you look back in history as to who Washington was and the fact that he owned slaves. Now, we're not going to do that, but we are trying to create a better and more perfect union by continuing to look at equity and looking at diversity and ensuring that we include everyone. Right now, we do not force people to say the Pledge of Allegiance. We say it. They can stand, they can sit, they can kneel, and I will protect your right to do that. And that's what makes it so much of getting to a more perfect union. But to throw it out, because there were many, many people who were not considered a full human being who fought for the country and fought for that flag. Not in the sense of fighting on the battlefield, but fought in Congress, fought in schools to create better schools, fought in communities so that there wasn't a distinction between who lived on what side of the railroad tracks and what services they did or did not get. For those who sat at the lunch counters, they fought for the flag of becoming a more perfect union. And it's because of that that some of the history that you cite doesn't include a lot of that history. And that's
because they're not
one of the
fighting for the
reasons why
flag.
we need to continue to work toward a more perfect union.
They weren't fighting for a flag. They were fighting for civil rights. They were fighting for lots of other things, right? The flag didn't, just as you said, the flag didn't represent them. The oath didn't do those things. People did those things. Their actions are what are patriotic, not what oath they pledge. And that's where, I mean, to me, this is a moral issue, right? And if you're going to talk about equity and access and not take it to its logical conclusion, to me, that's problematic.
Okay, at this point, because we are divided on this topic.
I think Tara had her hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I think at this point we're going to end the conversation. I apologize, but people have been given opportunities to say words.
I wanted to hear from our student rep, sorry. That was.
I understand, thank you. So at this point, I'm going to ask directors actually. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at how to move forward from a logistics standpoint. So it is my understanding that we are divided, but there is potentially a general consensus. And I would like to call for a vote. So I am going to bring a motion forward that we keep the flag salute as part of our regular meeting schedule of our board meeting agenda structure. And we are going to do a roll call vote. Darlene, can you help facilitate that?
Oh, a point of order. Hold on. So sorry. So are we voting on the meeting structure? Like, and if we're going to make a motion, we'll need a second. But also, I mean, can we? So
it's procedural. It doesn't need a vote, right? It doesn't need an official vote.
Yeah,
it just needs
either
consensus.
Yeah, but we also need the
so I
land
understand that, and typically, as I've had conversation earlier in trying to understand how to proceed through this topic, it is procedural, but because we are a divided board on this, I thought that for a matter of clarity, a vote on the matter would provide the.
So would it be fair that we're all in agreement that the land acknowledgement should be a part of the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're pretty much in agreement with that piece. I mean, I guess I just have I don't know that anybody, so we were having I thought this was a discussion. So we're having a discussion about the structure of the meetings and what should or shouldn't get added. Unless somebody's making a motion to add or subtract something, it would just stay as is. And so it's like at some point I was thinking, oh, we make a motion or some kind of do something structurally, add the land acknowledgement, but it seemed like potentially on the pledge, there wasn't going to be any action. Like there was nothing to vote up or down.
So by general consent, it's my understanding that we are all in agreement that we'd like to add a land acknowledgement. And I'm going to leave the placement of that, whether it comes before or after the flag salute, to further review by Dr. Boughton, perhaps, or her team.
Putting it right on you, Shelley.
Somebody.
We'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we can follow up later on that. And then I'm not hearing any further changes to the agenda. Are there any other changes that Director Lassane?
There was one change that we thought about doing is that if we were going to have an executive session, it would be done at the beginning. So it would not, like at 4:30, it would not be held after the meeting. Are we still going to consider that as an agenda structural change?
That would be great.
I think in talking through that, it was my understanding that the logistics of that become very complicated because you have to call if you have executive session, and I would ask that Sarah Mack or Darlene jump in here, but if you have an executive session, you have to call your meeting to order at 4:30, which means that folks that want to attend your meeting might show up at 4:30. We don't always have executive sessions. So it leaves a lot of question about whether the meeting's starting at 4:30 or 5 o'clock to your general public.
That's correct. That's correct. Caroline, you're correct. An executive session is part of the meeting. And so you would have to call your regular meeting to order at 4:30. All of you would be present to call that meeting to order. And then you would announce that you're going into executive session if you have it. And then you would, do your regular announcement of the time it's going to take and when you're going to adjourn your executive session and come back into the regular meeting and continue the meeting. But an executive session is not a separate meeting and it's not a separate standalone component of a meeting.
My concern is executive sessions can go 10 minutes or they can go over an hour. And we've had a variation of it, sometimes over you know, 2 hours, depending on what we're doing. And so I would have concern that the timing, and, you know, we might convene for 5 minutes and then wait 25 minutes to get into our business, or we might make the public wait a half an hour or longer if we're in a lengthy executive session. So it is, because of those logistics, I believe that it is best still placed at the end of our meetings.
So I have a question for Sarah, and maybe something changed, because I just haven't had that experience. Like did something change with like the open meeting rules? Because from what I remember, we could have executive session. This is again not on this board, but having executive sessions or work sessions, we just simply had to make sure that they were, you know, publicized. And then we would do it as needed. Like, so we had our normal board meeting started in the 6 o'clock range, and we would publicize as needed executive sessions. And it wasn't we didn't have a standing executive session. It was just when we needed one, we'd publicize it. Most times we did it early. If it ran a little bit into the meeting, we'd have somebody go down and say, okay, there'll be 10 more minutes, but it was we took a pretty good swag at it, starting at 4 or starting at 3:30 to make a 5 or 6 o'clock meeting.
Right, so what you're talking about is using special meetings to hold executive sessions. That's different than just moving the order of the agenda. So if you're moving the order of your standing agenda to make the executive session at the beginning of the standing agenda, or, you know, the order of your meeting, then that's what I'm talking about. If you're talking about removing a standing executive session as a component of your agenda and only calling a special meet and only using them, you know, during a special meeting, that's different. That's different than what the proposal I just heard.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because that actually clears up entirely why I've been so confused with the structure of these meetings. So it seems like it just is a Everett thing to do it as a standing component of the meeting, whereas other districts potentially do it as needed. So like right now we know kind of sort of when we might have executive sessions, and sometimes we don't, but we definitely could give the public, you know, I don't know what it is, 48 hours notice to say, yep, we're calling a special meeting, which is, for all intents and purposes, our executive session. That way we could remove it from our structural, like the structure of our agenda, and not have that kind of weirdness where we'd be staying late or getting early. Is that?
I think we do that for like the superintendent evaluation. Isn't that executive session? That's a special meeting.
A special meeting, but couldn't we do that all the time? I mean, I'm just saying it seems a little bit easier than always having these kind of standing executive sessions that we rarely use. And when we do use them, we have plenty of time to give the public's notice that we're going to use it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, why not just knock the executive session out of the meeting
completely off?
Completely, and then just do them ad hoc.
And I'll tell you from experience, it's a lot easier on your schedule to do it that way, because then you're literally just doing it when you need it and not feeling super constrained by being very tired, and it just works out better time-wise, I think.
Sometimes you do need an executive session that's done after the meeting if it involves a personnel issue or it involves a legal issue. And those things sometimes don't come up early enough so that you can plan to have them beforehand. So to have it on the schedule as an executive session after the meeting makes a lot of sense. It's just that I brought this up because someone asked if it were possible to move that to the beginning so that we could push our meetings back to 5 o'clock. And I only brought it up because of that reason. And so I'd like to rescind that. But I do believe at times that it is important to have an executive session, because when you're in negotiations with the unions and all of those personnel issues, and things do come up when you're talking about land purchases, those come up, they're unscheduled, and it has to follow immediately that day.
So, and I don't necessarily disagree. I'm just wondering, because on other boards, it's just not, it feels like, I guess, what's our notice to the public like for special meetings? If it's 48 hours, we're within that all the time. Like the nature of our agenda basically gives that notice, right? So let's say something came up, I don't know. I guess what I'm asking is that, does that really, are we really constrained by that type of timing? Because it feels like we do have that 48-hour notice that we could give the public to say, look, we're going to have an executive session after our next board meeting. And all we have to do is publicize that when we publicize the agenda. But I guess, have we been in a situation where it literally came up on the fly, where we went into executive session, but we didn't know until we already convened a board meeting? I guess like less than 48 hours. I guess, Sarah, maybe that was a question for you. I just haven't had that experience.
In certain situations with personnel issues that have come up within 48 hours of a meeting that need attention, or sometimes contract negotiations that are ongoing and changing frequently, but not typically.
I would love to, yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Pam. I just haven't, there's a lot of big districts out there that's generally, there is that notice. Like, I don't know, but if you guys want to keep it that way, that's fine. It's just a lot easier on the schedule wise to take control of that piece of it. And sometimes I feel like the way we've structured our meetings is for a time that has passed, like things that have happened in the past with the district. And so this agenda was structured in a really non-flexible way that was not super accessible to the public and other things. But I feel like that time has passed. And so maybe we can, just think about changing things up a little bit to represent the time that we're in now, which is not quite so contentious, and folks aren't quite so paranoid, just putting it out there. So we can maybe have a little more flexibility.
I wonder if there's not a middle ground we could talk about where, it seems like, at least to me, a lot of the executive sessions that I've personally been in on were things that we had some idea was coming within a certain amount of time, right? Updates on different things. So why not, when possible, when those things come up, we do separate executive sessions and then just leave the executive session in the agenda just on the off chance that we need it, not that we have to use it. But instead of scheduling those things for the meeting, because sometimes we only have one meeting a month, and things come up.
I concur with that idea.
That's a good idea.
That sounds like a structurally possible option.
Yeah. That sounds like a great idea. That leaves us the flexibility for stuff on the fly, but then being super intentional with those other ones so that we can make it timed, call them special meetings, get it ahead of the thing, respect everyone's schedule. That would be a great compromise.
So I guess there's no action.
There's no change. Yeah. There's no change on that. Okay. So can I just make a motion to add the land acknowledgement and then do the TBD about where exactly, and then we can, or can we just get to general consensus?
I think there's general consensus to add the land.
Okay. Yay.
Yeah.
And we'll look into this. It will be, I believe, in the consent agenda, whatever we decide on tonight, to finalize the vote at our next regular meeting. And at that point in time, before that point in time, we will figure out the appropriate spot for that.
Okay. I think I understand that. I'm still a little queasy with that, but I mean, in terms of how we're getting this passed, but yeah.
This is an action item. You can act on it tonight.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go on the consent agenda. Is that what you're saying, Darlene? Yeah, because it feels like something we could actually do and then implement for our next meeting, and when you say take action on tonight, would it make it cleaner to have a motion, a second, and just vote? That's kind of where I'm feeling. So, okay, I'm just that little parliamentarian hat. So, can I make a motion that we add a land acknowledgement to our structured agenda with a TBD for placement?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to add the land acknowledgement. Do you want to do a roll call vote, or do we just do a regular vote?
Regular vote is fine.
Regular vote. Yeah, regular vote works. Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? We have approved a new agenda structure. So that takes us now to our second item of new business, and actually the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items of business. Mr. Fleckenstein is going to walk us through several policies. 13.02 is policy 2216, academic acceleration. Mr. Fleckenstein. If you're talking, you're on mute still.
No, I just unmuted,
okay.
but thank
Pausing.
you. Yeah, I'm trying to navigate a couple different things here.
Okay.
But, well, thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I would like to begin by proposing new policy 2216, academic acceleration, which has been prepared for the board's consideration this evening to comply with the passage of House Bill 1599, which requires districts to adopt a policy about academic acceleration by the 2021-22 school year. The purpose of this new policy is to automatically advance each student's coursework. Once the student completes a course, the district automatically enrolls the student in the next most rigorous course. This will provide greater access for all students to advanced placement and dual credit courses for high school and college. Academic acceleration must align with the goals in the student's high school and beyond plan, and students and parents have the opportunity to opt out of academic acceleration for an alternative course or program if they so choose. The goal of academic acceleration is to reduce historic and systemic barriers to advanced coursework for students from low-income families and students of color.
Thank you. Directors, are there any questions? Okay, hearing none, we will move this to second reading.
Actually, sorry, I was
Oh,
just,
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I just, so just Larry, I guess with the academic acceleration, so does that mean, just to walk me through like what that would mean? So if a kiddo's in, you know, honor science, that means they're going to get put into the next absolute highest level automatically without asking to be put in it. Is that kind of correct?
Yes, it still is in alignment with their high school and beyond plan. So while what we're looking to do is to try to promote our students to take rigorous coursework like this, and also ensure that all of our students are accessing those advanced opportunities without barrier. For example, the barrier we're trying to remove with this particular policy is requiring or getting somebody to advocate for the student to take an advanced course as opposed to just automatically doing it.
Okay, and I'm just going to put up my general objection, which I've talked with you and Peter about, which is putting kids in classes, like just making sure that they have the opportunity to say no, right? Because the flip side of it is if we have kiddos in classes that that are a little bit too much for them, they could be getting a solid A in a class, but instead they're struggling to get a C in a more rigorous class, and that really tanks their GPA. So just making sure there's an appropriate ripcord. And again, specifically with that Jackson AP shenanigans where they get put in the AP course and they can't get out. I feel like a policy like this would perpetuate something like that. So I just want to ensure that there's some type of ripcord for a student or family to say, hey, we don't want to go that route. We'd rather stick with the high GPA than having to, you know, beg and plead to get our kid out of a course that they're not going to succeed in. So I guess, does that leave some room for that? Okay.
Yes, and this portion that I'm highlighting speaks directly to your concern.
And they will, okay. And just making sure it's an appropriate amount of time to opt out, not like before, because what I read a few years ago, it was they would have had to opt out in the spring or in the spring for classes in the fall, right? So it's, just making sure that if they get there in the fall, within a few days, they can still opt out.
Yep. And I had a great conversation about how we'll be updating our course catalog and the information contained within it as this new policy is implemented for the coming school year. So families are well aware of what their options are.
To it. Perfect. Yes. Yeah, as long as it's really, really clear.
Yep. And so at the time, even though it is in March when they start developing or revising, selecting courses for the next year, this will be in the course catalog and those options related to those pathways that we have, that rigorous course pathway that we have. So
awesome.
We'll be working on updating our communications as well.
Just a follow-on question, just for clarity. So do they opt out before each enrollment period or just once a year?
So we register for courses in secondary in the spring. Typically it's in the month of March. And so that would be the time where students would look at their high school and beyond plan. They would have the experience they're currently having second semester. And I'm just gonna say like Algebra 2 class, right? And at that point, they would have the option to look at their high school and beyond plan, sit down, look at those courses in the course catalog with their families, and then make an informed decision based on the next available courses for them. That could mean that they're going into AP statistics. It could mean they wanted to go into calculus or other options at that point. But then they would have that ability to make those adjustments prior to the next school year.
I also wanted to know, we had a previous conversation about in the course catalog, there's some really great flow charts that really help define, because I was kind of confused. I never knew what the trajectory was when my students were registering. And I feel like they've done a really good job of creating flow charts that help, in a very simple format and direct way, help parents and students understand what the next step or that next accelerated step would look like and be, and talked about making those charts more available, like on our district website and such. So it's more apparent and easier information to access.
Absolutely. And just for director's information, in your board agenda item, we attached, based on that suggestion, the course catalog for this school year. And at the beginning section of the English language arts, math, social studies, it gives those pathways that you referred to, President Mason, and we'll make those more readily available on our website in preparation for the next registration of classes for the next school year.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? Okay, thank you. We will go ahead and move policy 2216 to second reading. And that takes us to 1303, policy 3143, district notification of juvenile offenders.
Revisions to policy 3143, district notification of juvenile offenders, comply with House Bill 1191 concerning school notifications. Based on the need for a comprehensive, cohesive approach in policy to address the requirements upon school districts regarding juvenile offenders, WASDA is recommending merging the content of policy 3143 with policies 3144, release of information concerning student sex and kidnapping offenders, and policy 4316, notification of threats of violence or harm. The proposed revisions also include changing the title from district notification of juvenile offenders to district notification and dissemination of information about student offenses and notification of threats of violence or harm. The revisions to policy 3143, district notification of juvenile offenders, has been reviewed by legal counsel in the superintendent's executive cabinet.
Thank you. Directors, any questions? And Mr. Fleckenstein, I'm just going to have you go ahead and kind of roll through these rather than introduce each one, since you introduce it right after I introduce it.
Sure.
So if there are no questions, and I'm hearing none, we will go ahead and move to we will take policy 3143 to second reading.
So with 3144, because this policy's language has been proposed this evening to be incorporated into the proposed revisions to policy 3143, we're recommending deletion.
Pretty straightforward. Any questions? Okay, we'll move this one to second reading as well.
For policy 3423, response to student injury or illness, these are to reflect official health guidance related to COVID-19 and are minor in scope, adding language that staff designated to provide student health support should be certified in first aid, CPR, and AEDs.
Directors, any questions or comments? Director Lassane, do you have something?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. I apologize. I thought I was unmuted. I apologize. Does this bring up the question that we have the proper staff at every school, whereas it says staff designated would be trained, Are we advocating that we'll have nurses at every school?
The policy does not identify nurses at every school.
Okay, it just says that staff that are filling in for nurses, when nurses aren't there, should be certified in first aid, CPR, and AED.
Yes, we have health room assistants that are first aid, CPR, and AED trained at each of our schools each day.
So we do have health agents as well as nurses. Is that what you're saying? At every school?
No, to clarify, we have health room assistants who
okay.
Yeah, who are stationed in the health room all day with students. We do have nurses hired by the district who go to each school, and a nurse is assigned a set of schools that they go and support.
So is the CPR training, the way the policy reads is it should be certified, so it's not required by our district?
Well, the model policy update is worded specifically this way, should be. However, we do have training for those staff that I just described. For health room assistants are trained this way. We also have training that we have here in the district for coaches, administrators, and many other staff within the district who are trained on all three of these areas. So although this is saying that health rooms and health room assistants would be trained in this, right? We have a multitude of adult staff members at each school who are trained in first aid, CPR, and AED.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you.
There's no further questions. We'll go ahead and move this to second reading.
Okay, proposed new policy 3535, Financial Aid Advising Day, is an opportunity within policy to focus on educational equity related to students pursuing post-secondary education. Last year, the legislature passed Senate Substitute House Bill 1599, which took steps to expand access to critical financial aid information for students through the High School and Beyond plan. Financial Aid Advising Day provides an opportunity to take this important work one step further by ensuring all students have specific access to this critical information. Beginning with the 2020-21 school year, all school districts with a high school must provide a Financial Aid Advising Day by December 1st of each year. Proposed new policy 3535, Financial Aid Advising Day, has been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet.
Directors, any questions or comments? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move policy 3535 to second reading.
We propose the deletion of policy 4316, notification of threats of violence or harm, because the policy's language has been proposed this evening to be incorporated into the proposed revisions of policy 3143, district notification to juvenile offenders.
Directors, any questions? Hearing none, we will move policy 4316 to second reading.
And finally, this evening, proposed revisions to policy 6112, rental, lease, or use of surplus district real property, are based on the passing of House Bill 2617, lease or rental of surplus property of school districts. The revisions add a recapture clause to the lease or rental of district surplus property. Additionally, the revisions add an exception to the prohibition of weapons on district property when districts rent property that will be used as a personal domicile. Revisions to policy 6112, rental, lease, or use of surplus district real property, has been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet.
Any questions on this policy, directors? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move policy 6112 and thank Mr. Fleckenstein for the overview of all those policies and the work that goes into them. Thank you. Okay, we're winding down here and we are moving on to Section 14 of the agenda, upcoming agenda items. And Dr. Sussman, may you please give an overview of our next 2 meetings?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. At the October 20th special meeting, the board will discuss student performance trends. At our regular meeting on October 27th, discuss fall 2020 reopening update and several policies for second reading at this time.
Great. That takes us to executive or closed session. And tonight we do not have an executive or closed session, which takes us to adjournment. So I want to thank everyone for hanging in there through a very longer than usual meeting. Director Lassane, do you want to say something? You're on mute again.
I have to mute 2 different devices. I was just waving because somebody waved.
Okay.
I thought they were waving at me.
At this time, I would like to go ahead and adjourn the meeting for the evening and say good night and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night, everybody. Drive safely.
Good night, everybody.
Drive safely, everyone. Home.
Bye. Have a good night.
Enjoy. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate your help so very, very much.
Oh, you're so very welcome, Pam.
Bye-bye.